Hello and welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, National Council of State approves 27,000 naira as minimum wage for the country as federal government promises to pay its workers 30,000 naira. Organised labour set to shift demand on 30,000 minimum wage to National Assembly as Trade Union Congress vows to resist renegotiation of tripartite committee's recommendation. Code of Conduct Tribunal insists on proceeding with the trial of the CJN. Justice Walter Onoge says the restraining orders by the Federal High Court and National Industrial Court are not binding on it. And Zimbabwean Human Rights Commission accuses security forces of systematic torture.
On Business News tonight, Central Bank asks federal government to accelerate implementation of value-added tax for an improved revenue generation and reduction in expenditure.
And on Sports News tonight, light aircraft carrying Cardiff City new signing Emiliano Sala goes missing over the English Channel Islands as search is suspended.
Hello, and from Abuja, European Union deploys 40 observers across Nigeria ahead of general elections as delegation meets with President Buhari in Abuja.
The federal government has finally made clear its position on the new minimum wage with the approval of 27,000 naira as the new national minimum wage for all workers above the age of 25 across the country. The decision was reached today at the Council of States meeting held in the nation's capital, Abuja. The meeting, presided over by the President Muhammadu Buhari, had in attendance the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, former heads of state including Chief Ernest Shonekan, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, Abdulsalami Abubakar, Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, President of the Senate, governors, as well as members of the Cabinet. The bill on the recommendation, which is only a benchmark, will be transmitted to the National Assembly by the close of work on Wednesday. Our correspondent Gloria Umezuki reports.
Members of National Council of State, including former heads of state, governors, President of the Senate, and cabinet members meet for the third time under the present administration. Handshakes and all smiles, President Muhammadu Buhari welcomes members. After an opening prayer by former President Olusegun Obasanjo, the Council holds a minute's silence for members who have passed away in the last 1 year.
May their souls rest in perfect peace. Amen.
After over 2 hours behind closed doors, the Minister of Labour and Productivity, Dr. Chris Ngige, at a briefing, breaks the news on a new minimum wage approval.
These three organs have permitted Mr. President now to transmit to the National Assembly a new minimum wage bill. The highlights is what you want to know. The figure of 27,000 monthly has been approved for transmission to the National Assembly.
The federal government is, however, augmenting the approved figure to 30,000 naira as new minimum wage for its workers.
So for levels 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as you go up, they're negotiable. But the minimum wage is for the lowest paid, the most vulnerable, the person on grade level 1, step 1. The federal government on its own, for their lowly paid worker, their most vulnerable worker, have agreed that it must be up to 30,000. But for every other person, private sector, state governments, local governments, the minimum wage for the entire country is 27,000.
The Council is also convinced that the Independent National Electoral Commission is ready to conduct the 2019 general elections.
A lot of things have been put in place, and I think we all concluded that it's important for the chairman to even speak to the nation on the preparedness of INEC for this election. That will convince all of us that this forthcoming election is going to be free and fair. He also told the council that they are not lacking in terms of finance.
The approval of 27,000 naira minimum wage hopefully puts to rest the controversy on this matter. The recommended bill is expected to be transmitted to the National Assembly by close of work on Wednesday, 23rd of January. Sancho Villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
It appears the decision by the National Council of State to propose 27,000 naira as a new minimum wage may not go down well with the organized labor, as they are threatening to resist the decision. According to the President of the Trade Union Congress, Mr. Boboye Kaigama, Labour will not entertain a renegotiation of the recommendations of the Tripartite Committee. He told Channels Television that workers will continue their struggle for the 30,000 naira minimum wage at the National Assembly. The NLC had on January the 8th embarked on a nationwide protest to pressure the federal government to urgently transmit the new minimum wage bill to the National Assembly for passage. And staying with the new minimum wage issue, the governor of Zamfara State, Abdulaziz Yari, says President Muhammadu Buhari deserves commendation for his commitment to the new minimum wage. According to him, President Buhari agreed to an increase in the national minimum wage despite bailing out states who could not pay salaries. He was speaking at a forum for the re-election bid, of President Muhammadu Buhari.
I think if my colleagues are here, 35 of them, 36 of them will agree with me, they will go forward with Buhari for so many reasons. I just mentioned in our Council of State, when they brought the issue of minimum wage, Mr. President, you have done something which is unexpected during the system of democracy and with the parallel parties available in leadership, whereby 27 out of 36 cannot pay salary. Some for 13 months, some for 14 months, some for 16 months, some for 8 months, respectively. You have to bail the state out of this trouble before they get settled and continue to stay in their respective states.
The approval of the new minimum wage did not just come by chance. Rather, the decision by the National Council of State to approve 27,000 naira is a result of pressure mounted by the Nigeria Labour Congress and its affiliates. In the heat of the debate, the Labour Union vowed to resist anything below the 30,000 naira it demanded for all workers and expressed its readiness to vote out any politician who refuses to accede to its demand. Our next report takes a look at the struggle to get the new minimum wage and Labour's perceived next line of action.
It's been a long-drawn battle between the Labour Union and the federal government to define the take-home pay that truly takes workers home. The Tripartite Committee on the new minimum wage concludes its work of several months, proposing a 30,000 naira new minimum wage. The committee had representations from the Governors Forum, Labour Union, and the organized private sector. November 6, 2018, President Muhammadu Buhari receives the committee's report and a draft bill that would be sent to the National Assembly. The president accedes to the demands, but sets up another committee.
In constituting this committee, we took into account the need for all stakeholders to be adequately represented. The government, the private sector, and most importantly, the workers. Our goal was to get an outcome that was consensual.
According to the president, the new twist is not a barrier to the transmission of the Tripartite Committee's report to the National Assembly on 23rd of January.
The representative from presidency and the commitment on that day to transmit this document on or before 23rd January 2019 is something that we shouldn't anticipate failure, because it won't go down well. We shouldn't anticipate failure. I just want to believe that Mr. President will keep to his word and honorably transmit that document without pressure.
Less than 24 hours to the report reaching the National Assembly, it's another twist. The National Council of States pegs the new minimum wage at 27,000 naira for the least paid workers in states and the private sector, while the federal government workers would take home 30,000 naira as their new minimum wage. Labour Union has consistently refused to shift grounds on its demand for a 30,000 naira new minimum wage for all workers and has vowed to resume its suspended strike across the nation. Will there be a common ground after the new proposal by the Council of State? Loretta Chiogo, Channels Television News.
Now let's get another perspective on all this. I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by the President of the United Labour Congress, Joe Ajero. Thanks a lot for joining us on the news at 10. Much. So 27,000 is the result after all the long negotiations and the talks, sometimes going late into the night. TUC and NLC have weighed in. What do you think?
Well, I don't think that 27,000 naira is our product, especially coming from the National Council of States. I don't know their rule, their constitutional role in fixing salaries. It has not happened before, and for them to wade in now to advise Mr. President on 27,000 naira minimum wage does not change anything. At most, if they were ready to advise, they could have advised before negotiation commenced. After negotiation and the parties agreed on 30,000, not even the National Assembly can change that figure.
So are you saying that the parties agreed on 30,000 and
clearly,
this 27?
Clearly, and submitted 30,000.
But that's not what the government seemed to be saying.
Well, government can say no other thing. At the tripartite committee, what was submitted to Mr. President was 30,000 naira minimum wage. And Mr. President promised that he was going to transmit it by 23rd. And by 23rd being tomorrow, workers in the country will still be expecting Mr. President to transmit 30,000 naira minimum wage to the National Assembly.
So are you saying what the Council of State has done is what now?
No, it's illegal. The Council of State doesn't have powers to fix salaries and wages. If they're advising Mr. President to announce a figure, at most that would be an award, wage award. It has nothing to do with minimum wage that a tripartite committee negotiates.
Well, looking at what has been released today now, federal workers will be paid 30,000, as they've said. So is it left to the states now to decide whether to top it up? And bearing in mind that some state governors have already said this is not going to work for us. So, I mean, how do you think this arrangement will work out?
This is the first time in history that you are going to have a discriminatory minimum wage. State this, national this. And I don't know how the National Assembly will do it. Because in amending it, the National Assembly will put there that the new national minimum wage will be this. So for you now to go into a discriminatory minimum wage, state this, national this, and then you decide for them the markets where they will buy, the schools where they will go. I don't know how they're going to operate it. And there will be a lot of problem here.
So are you saying from your perspective that no further negotiations? Because as you see, the TUC have already said this is going to go back to the National Assembly. And from what you're saying, talks are over. 30,000 is it?
Yeah, 30,000, 30,000. At the National Assembly is another theater. Their job is to, append that the new national minimum wage from 18,000 is now 30,000. And that's their job. So if anybody is tinkering with it, the person had no basis calling for a tripartite committee to negotiate initially. Mr. President is free to announce a wage award. I will pay workers 100,000. That one is different from a minimum wage all over the world.
So what options are open to Labour now? Just take, for instance, this 27,000 is what is the government's final offer, last word, as they say. Is it going to be strike again, seeing that people are already wary of strikes? What would you, yes, you have said 30, but in the event that it ends up as 27, then
we have not even embarked on any strike, talk less of strike, being strike weary. We're expecting that Mr. President, as a man of honor, who promised to transmit the new minimum wage to the National Assembly, and he knew that the recommendation was 30,000. By tomorrow, we transmit 30,000 naira to the National Assembly. If by tomorrow he didn't do same, then the labor unions will go back to the drawing board.
All right, President of the United Labour Congress, Joe Ajero, thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts on the news at 10 tonight. And in part two, after the break, court adjourns the trial of leader of the Islamic movement of Nigeria, Ibrahim El-Zakzaky, and his wife to March the 25th, 2019, to enable them to get proper medical attention. That's in a moment. Do stay with us.